Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. In a few minutes, America will be 250 years old, and I've been doing videos just helping new Americans to understand America's history. Now, on the 4th of July, 1776, the framers, also known as the founding fathers, did not have things all planned out. People think that America was a great design. It was all, well thought out. It wasn't. Till this day, Americans have a legacy of improvisation. Uh, you know, uh, so playing things by ear. That was pretty much what the founding fathers were doing. I've done a video discussing the Declaration of Rights and Grievances of October 14, 1774. That came before, came about almost 2 years before the Declaration of Independence, authored by Thomas Jefferson, on which was published on July 4, 1776, and it marked our independence. Now, when we did get independence, we didn't have the constitution we have now. That didn't come until 1789, right? It didn't take effect until April the 30th, 1789. We didn't have the sort of form of government we have now. In fact, the United States of America was not yet one nation, right? So on July 4, 1776, and even up till 1789, uh, when the Constitution that we have today came into effect, America was really a loose alliance of 13 different states that, it wouldn't be incorrect to call them distinct countries, but they weren't strong. So they were an alliance of states. So in fact, on July 4, 1776, it is safe to say the framers didn't know exactly what they wanted, but they knew what they didn't want, right? They knew what they didn't want. And you could see it from the Declaration of Rights and Grievances of October 14, 1774, right? They didn't want taxation, right? They didn't want the abusive, the abuses by the British Parliament. There are so many things they didn't want. They didn't want the intolerable acts. They didn't want the abrogation of their self-government, right? They wanted to be able to rule themselves, but they didn't know what form of government that they wanted, right? They didn't know what form of government they wanted. So in 1774, you see what they were initially appealing, to what they were initially protesting, what they were demanding or requesting of the British king was the rights, that their rights were recognized as Englishmen, to get representation in the British Parliament, that they should be treated as Englishmen, right? They thought they weren't being treated like, in the same way that their brethren in England were in Great Britain were being treated. So that was how it started. But when the rubber hit the road, and there was a pushback, the British Crown, they were, they were demonstrating more heavy-handedness and the pushback. Each time they made demands, the British just responded with more heavy-handedness, and the British wanted their taxes because they had almost become bankrupt from the prosecution of the 7 Year War, which they won, which secured the Ohio River Valley, which eventually became part of America in 1783. By the time the war came to an end, people don't realize that the war for independence lasted many long years, right? It lasted. The war didn't come to an end until 1783 with the Treaty of Paris, right? Officially, with the Treaty of Paris. Of course, we say that Britain still had an eye on America, and they say they fought a second war of independence in 1812 with Great Britain, when Great Britain would actually invade Washington D.C. But anyway, importantly, The form of government we had on July 4th, 1776 was very loose, right? So we didn't have a strong central government. We didn't have a judiciary. We didn't have an executive. We had a unilateral, so a unicameral legislature, right? We had a unicameral legislature. Um, the president of the Second Congress, right? We started with the first Continental Congress, and we had the Second Continental Congress, and then we had the Confederation Congress until we had the United States government, right? In 1789, April 30, 1789, under the current constitution we have, which was created in 1787, but it didn't take effect until 1789, right? And it provided us three major branches of government. That's Article 1, that's the bicameral legislature, that's Congress, and then Article 2, the executive arm of the government under the president, and then Article 3, the judiciary, with the highest level of the court being the Supreme Court. So, in the beginning, the founding fathers wanted they didn't want a strong national government, right? So national government, central government, federal government, they were synonymous terms that were used in the 18th century at the time of the revolution. So they didn't want a strong national government. So the what we have from 1776 up until 1789 was very weak. The federal government could not impose taxes. It was the states that collected their own taxes. They could not control commerce. There are just so many things. They didn't have a bureaucracy. As I said, there was no judiciary, there was no executive, no executive branch, no bureaucracy, no administrative arm of government. So of national government. The president was just a placeholder, right? We had people who were presidents of the Continental Congress, like John Hancock, as of the day of the 4th of July, as of the time of the Declaration, right? So that's why you see his handwriting was so emblazoned, and John Hancock, that name, John Hancock has become synonymous with signature. So the founding fathers did not know what they wanted, but they knew what they didn't want. They knew they didn't want a government that reminded them of they didn't want a strong central government at that time. That reminded them of the heavy-handedness of Great Britain, right? The Crown and the British Parliament that had imposed these suffocating taxes on them, that were violating their rights, that were quartering soldiers. Soldiers could just go and lodge in their homes. And so you see all the things they didn't want. They put them in the first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights that became part of the Constitution of 1789, the Constitution that we have today. The Bill of Rights weren't ratified until 1791, but they were drafted in 1789. There were 12 amendments that Congress proposed, but the states only ratified 10, right? The 10 Bill of Rights. I've done a video on that. First Amendment, right to freedom of speech. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Third Amendment, no quartering of soldiers. Fourth Amendment prevents unreasonable search and seizure. Fifth Amendment, that's the right of due process. Sixth Amendment, that has to do with a fair and speedy trial, right to have a fair, speedy, and public trial. And the Seventh Amendment, so the Seventh Amendment, that's the right to have in a federal right to have a defense, right? Right to have a defense in a federal civil suit, right, of a certain amount, right, to have an attorney for your defense in a federal civil suit of of a certain amount, right, to your defense in a federal civil suit. And then the Eighth Amendment, of course, that's the freedom from freedom from cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bills and fines. The Ninth Amendment, that those rights, it's just saying that all these rights, right, they're not exhaustive. The fact that certain rights have not been listed in the Bill of Rights, that does not negate the existence of those rights. And then the 10th delineates the powers between the federal and the states, that those rights that have not been delegated expressly to the federal government by the US Constitution, right, are reserved to respectively to the states or, to the people, right? So that's the Bill of Rights. So they knew the things they didn't want. The British government had been so oppressive, so they wanted at the time they had, so for about 13 years, the government was very weak, very loose, and of course, because of the problems, the fiasco of having such a weak national government, they had rebellions all over the place. There was chaos. They realized they needed a strong national government. So, and that's why they came up with the constitution that took effect in 1789, the same constitution that we have today. And since then, the US federal government has become so strong and so powerful with a very huge bureaucracy. That's a story for another time. But now, uh, July 4th, 1776, the founding fathers, the framers, knew that they wanted a loose, they wanted a freedom from the crown, from this oppressive heavy-handedness of the British Parliament and the British government, and they got it. My name is Oluro Timiosha. Happy 4th of July. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.